All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault Behind the Vault Door. My name is Mark Morelli. I'll be your podcast host for tonight's episode. I discussed it with Dave, and we thought about a couple of things. Perhaps in the interest of directing traffic and bringing people over from the Instagram page and the Facebook page over to the podcast. Like to see the podcast kind of take off. You guys have always been there. The people that are listening currently, God bless you. You get the news first. The podcasts are a great place to be. They're easy enough for me to do that I can share my thoughts with you all very, very quickly and relatively easily. Dave still has to edit this stuff. I'm sorry I make you wait sometimes between podcasts, but I'm doing quite a bit. So, we're definitely going to be bringing you more, of special guests. Some of the most intelligent people I know are members of the firearm community. I'm really looking forward to interviewing a few people coming up very shortly. We're going to be putting out these podcasts probably a little more often. I'm going to slow down. I promise to keep promising myself to do this. I'm going to slow down on the Instagram a little bit. If I don't get back to you right away, I'm really sorry. For those of you that I've put off on meeting up for range days, I apologize. Between getting sick over this awful winter a couple of times and struggling through some bad chest colds, I'm definitely planning on getting out the line with a bunch of you people that I've been meaning to talk to, see, and shoot with, and certainly share and exchange ideas with. I'm going to get around to you, I promise. I'm sitting here right now thinking to myself, what would we do if we, had to sit down and talk about, perhaps this week's posts? And we thought about it. We thought, if we discuss the posts, it might cut down on some of the wording and thus a lot of my time. Maybe the podcast could be used to explain some of the posts rather than to do it on the page where, maybe people aren't as interested in doing a lot of reading. But for the people that want to know more, we're going to start directing you guys to the podcast so you can learn more about the things you're seeing as opposed to explaining them on the page. And I'm thinking that's a good idea. I can't remember if it was Dave's or mine. I'll give him credit for this one. He comes up with so many brilliant ideas. If this one was mine, I forgot it. I could tell you that happens quite a bit. There's that much going on currently in my life. But, take a look at this week's posts. Certainly starting off the one day with that beautiful Cabot gun. 1911 Cabot. Jeez. We're there at the show and we go to the Cabot booth. And it's just like unbelievable. Talk about like artwork. I understand that a number of the guns on display were actually, people that had purchased them had offered them up for display at the SHOT Show. And wow, like just so beautiful. I mean, it almost seemed like an entire gun was like case hardened. Some of the most beautiful works of metal art I've ever seen there at the Cabot booth. And moving right along into the day, we managed to get out Brandon for his birthday and do a little bit of shooting. It was nice to relax, with him and the little lady and get out there on the line and finally engage in a little bit of, fun, rather than work, which was really a treat for me. And, I won't forget that anytime soon. It was a really good time. We definitely, got into, the vintage crowd. They get enough of their... I mean, I'm one of you. I'm never going to deny that. Bringing the M1 carbine, to life for you guys. I love doing that. I love putting up pictures of that gun. We've got one up on the CGV relocation plan, and I got to apologize, folks. Put up an M1 carbine and, tell people that the family is interested. And seeing this one go to a good home, watching the flurry of questions. And of course, I want to answer everybody in detail. And I apologize for all of you out there that got half explanations from me. I was trying to keep up. I'll definitely get back to you. I'm going to go over all those messages again. I'm going to have to dig deep into the pile and start from the beginning and make sure that everyone gets their questions answered appropriately and correctly and completely. I know there's several of you that really want to see this piece, and we're going to make arrangements for that to happen. It's a 1943 Inland M1 carbine, and it's this beautiful gun, and I can't say that it's completely original equipment. I mean, to be fair to everyone out there, I insist on being 100% completely forthright about the state of these guns when I describe them. Because really, we've had people say, you can't sell guns. We're not selling guns. We're showcasing these items and just kind of directing people to those that would be interested in parting with them. We're acting as kind of a go-between and giving an assessment on the value of the firearms and trying to impress upon families, that some of these items are significant and are worth perhaps a little more than you thought. And and to get them into the hands of people that truly appreciate them and want them, and to act as a mediating body in that process. For me, it's wonderfully rewarding. It is time consuming. Answering people's questions, negotiating, and expressing the family's wishes. As it relates to the values that they hope to achieve for these items, realistically, and that's where I come in to be honest with them and say, well, look, this is what you can expect given the condition of the item, the make, the model, how its state of repair. Some people bring in things that are terrifically worn. Love the idea of making any gun beautiful, but some are more difficult than others. But I believe in being honest and definitely not filtering the photos and showing people any damage that's there, and accurately describing the condition and state of the firearms. I love the idea of people really being happy afterwards. I think this M1 carbine is going to make people really happy. It's not completely original. The front sight base appears to be changed over to like a post-war unit without the ears. Definitely, not the original magazine. It looks like somebody's hunting magazine. It's a shorter variety of magazine, but otherwise a fairly unmolested matching numbers M1 carbine from 1943 and an inland at that, which is really kind of cool. The chances that this thing saw combat are pretty likely, being the year that it was made. Even if it didn't get used in World War II, it definitely went to Korea and perhaps even Vietnam, who knows. And so to have this grace through our hands and to have an opportunity to test fire it really was a pleasure. And I wouldn't downplay that at all. I really enjoyed spending a little time with this fancy little rifle, and it's such a handy piece, and it's such a joy to shoot, and it's such a smooth little nudge against your shoulder, but that something's coming out of the end pretty fast. Really a great firearm, an enjoyable one to shoot. And to have an opportunity on a bona fide piece of World War II or Korean War history, is fantastic. And so there has been a lot of interest in this item, and I'm really happy to say that the family's requested we wait just a little bit with it. Certainly, we want to make sure that everybody gets a fair shake at it, and we want to see it go to a good home. And I'd like to see the family get true value for this item, and to be fair to them completely. So, to the person that manages to give a loving new home to this rifle, I congratulate you. It hasn't happened yet, folks, but definitely we have some people that are closing in on this one. If you haven't seen the M1 carbine in our past posts, it's it's there. Just check out the CGV relocation plan, and you'll come across her. She's a beauty. I really love spending time with a great rifle like this, and I'm really pleased to bring this one to you guys. So now, moving right along, we did a little bit, and this one got quite a bit of attention. I expected it would. A young lady, one of our members, fantastic, follower and, fun to talk to, little gal, Laura. She sends to brings this to my attention, this Glock that is painted to look like a Nintendo, gaming console gun from like the 1980s. And, I knew that posting this was going to be controversial. I knew there was going to be some unhappy people. I knew there was going to be some people that were going to say, man, that's cool. Because I was one of them. As soon as I saw this thing, and it looks like the toy gun that I played with as a child, and, I smoked, ducks indiscriminately, as they move faster and faster until I missed. I loved playing that game, so when I saw this thing, my heart jumped. I went, wow, that's cool. And I began to think, who do I know that's Cerakotes? I really want to get that done to mine. And then I stopped myself, and I realized, it looks like a toy. And then the retired police officer in me kicks in, and I think to myself, no, I can't. You know what? I can't get behind that, man. As cool as I think that is, I can't say that's a cool thing to do. Like it being, if the gun never left the house, or if people never saw it on social media, or if it wasn't a home in the United States where perhaps the storage laws are a little different than they are in Canada. We are required to lock up everything unloaded in trigger locks if it's in a locker, or if you've got a vault. You definitely have to secure these items in a way that some states do not require you to do, if any. Now that I think about it, but you're painting a gun to look like a toy. Just didn't sit well with me. And, I had to say, I saw both sides of it. And when I put up the post, I kind of, as some described it, rode the fence a little bit, which I don't deny, because I've mixed feelings about this. It looks like a toy, and as a toy, a real gun shouldn't look like a toy, for a lot of reasons. And definitely, as a former police officer, the dangers connected to a firearm painted like a toy are many, and to not recognize the potential dangers in that would be, I believe, to be ignorant. If nothing else, perhaps you hadn't thought of it. Definitely don't want to have people out there painting, real guns looking like toys. From a policing perspective, it's dangerous to have children perhaps confusing firearms, or even on a deeper subconscious level to equate firearms in any way, shape, or form to toys, or vice versa. I think is a mistake. So does it make me anti-gun? No, absolutely not. Does it make me anti-freedom? No. Hey, do what you want. I just don't agree with it personally, and I can't really get behind it. And and I could see why people think it's cool. I did. I jumped. I was like, this is one of those moments where it's not about trust, and it's not about responsible. It's about maybe sending the right message, and perhaps avoiding some problems. And which for me is not the kind of thing that I admit to too often to the firearm community. But there are going to be times when perhaps you won't see things my way, but I definitely would like to look at the situation fairly, and not compromise anybody's rights unnecessarily, but to make it very clear, I'll always be about public safety. So I love the idea of perhaps giving an opinion on the subject at some point in my career. Definitely think that possibility might come one day. I really hope it does. It'll mean that people are willing to listen, and if they're willing to listen to me, then I'd love to talk. Some people have accused me of doing too much of that. I don't know. I look. Hey, that's why I started radio podcasting. I love talking to people, and I just thought this was a better way to reach a wider audience. So if you want to get this stuff around, I would really appreciate it. I love the idea of sharing this. We definitely are growing. Dave has expressed very strong opinions about putting out more podcasts because you know what, we seem to do a good job. I'm enjoying the people I'm interviewing for you, and I love the opportunity to bring you great personalities within the firearm community that have intelligent thoughts to share. Certainly, I'm going to continue to make the rounds. I'm expecting to have Big Don on the show sometime soon. I'm going to be definitely interviewing Two Eye Practical and having a word with him about firearm ownership and, more importantly, the love of firearms, because that kid he has it in his eye. I love that about him. There's so many different people that I definitely want to talk to, put on the show, and expose you guys to. Once you get used to their personalities, they're terrifically dynamic, fun, friendly people. They can be quirky, but you know what though? Definitely each and every one of them in their own right is brilliant. And I'm really looking forward to bringing them to you guys. So, looking at this Nintendo gun, and back to it, I should say, I got a little bit of flack over that. I'd like to think that I explained myself pretty fully, but overall, I love it, think it's cool, but just, can't really get behind it. Sorry for all the Saracruters out there, that have thought about doing it. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but you know what, hey, to each his own. That's the way I see it. And certainly, I'm looking forward to seeing some of the things that are out there. I'm going to take a look at these things a little more closely. Maybe I won't offer opinions on them, but now that I know they're out there, I think it's really kind of interesting, and I'm going to keep an eye out for them. So, as I go through, some of these different pictures, definitely, coming across that Lynx. Yeah, there's a beautiful picture of that gun. The Lynx. One of our members was presented with another saying, making mention of this Lynx rifle, and one of our members said, "Well, what's a Lynx?" And so I posted this pic just for him. Great kid. And he didn't seem to know what it was. So I had to show him because I saw this thing at SHOT Show 2018. And I mean, if you haven't seen the Lynx before, this gargantuan rifle, and it's a bullpup 50 cal semi-automatic rifle, and the whole barrel recoils within the chassis of the gun. I've seen these things operating in videos only. I'm kind of looking forward to maybe perhaps pulling the trigger on one someday. Really cool units, not cheap at $15,000 a pop. We definitely saw the guys at SHOT Show, one of the upper levels from Tactical Imports. Saw one of these things in real life. They were fantastic. They spoke to us for a few minutes and, discussed with them some of the possibilities of reviewing some of their firearms again in the future. We had done their Type 81. And really enjoyed it. The video's done quite well on YouTube. If you guys haven't seen it yet, I would recommend you go back and have a look. Cool gun. I saw the Lynx though, and I forgot what the 81 was. This thing was like just this mammoth rifle. It looks like it could take a plane out of the sky. Looking at it though, it's like a 50 cal rifle. It's semi-automatic, and I'm looking at it, and I just wonder why it's not a Barrett, 82. Like, I've always wanted to have one. I had an opportunity to buy one actually way back when. I came down to two choices. I could either go to university or I could buy a rifle that I probably couldn't afford to run. When I was a young man, I think I was probably about 20 at the time, and I used one. Had come through one of our local gun shops, and they wanted like $6,600. And back then, that's what it cost for like an entire semester's worth of books and tuition at the university I attended. And I actually seriously considered taking a year off and just spending more time working. Truthfully, that may have actually happened, only I didn't buy that rifle. I remember I was still buying guns back then in my early university years while I was working. Tanked, I believe, my first year pretty badly, and decided instead that I would, work more. Probably to pay for my horribly, growing gun habit, which was proving to be quite addictive. I had a friend, in the early 90s. He was a great guy. His name was Huba. And Huba and I had our own little personal arms race going on. And I remember it was such a fun time. I'd buy a gun, he'd buy a gun. We had a little competition going. Who was going to have the bigger gun. It was very exciting to try and keep up with Huba back then. He was such a great guy, and he loved his guns every bit as much as I did. And he had gotten himself a SPOS 12 shotgun at one point. And I mean, it had a fixed stock. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be when it came out of the box. But it definitely was the gun. And I remember thinking, wow, like that thing's great. What did that thing cost? Like $500. He had one, and I always wanted one. And I would have changed out that stock for the Movie Magic wire one, immediately. But Huba didn't feel the need to. I remember going to the range for the first time with Huba to shoot skeet with that gun. We had our fair share of problems at this gun club that we used to go to. If you can imagine, the CGV is a young man in his early 20s that was enamored with, machine style pistols, and, AK-47 and AR-15 type rifles and monstrous handguns. I mean, as a very young man, I sank a lot of my money into guns before I got into policing and got out of it. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but I got out of guns. After the bans of the 90s, I left such a horrible taste in my mouth that I kind of walked away from it and went, never again. And that's what happened. And, there were a lot of things leading up to that point, though, that I had a lot of fun. But I remember at the time shooting at this one particular gun club in Ancaster, Ontario. And I mean, probably people are going to criticize me for saying that because it could only be one of, a couple of places. And so, and not knocking them. It was a different time, certainly in the early 90s. We had a number of people. There were a lot more people shooting shotgun, sporting clay type activities were going on at this particular club. And then there were handgun and rifle activities, but they did occur there, and it was a good outdoor range. And I was really looking forward to shooting my guns. And I joined this gun club, and of course my collection grew as a young man. as fast as I could grow it. I remember, I was on the search for, the $100 gun. I wasn't making much as a kid, so I had limited funds to spend on this sort of thing. I started making my own bullets with, a single stage press, and I mean, I could make 200, and then I wouldn't, be able to go any further than that because, if I went out for a day of shooting, because that meant that was every bullet I had. I did my best to collect everything I could. If I got a couple extra, that was great. But even as a young man, I was trying to be economical. But we joined this club, and a lot of shotgun guys were there, like old school, what people affectionately refer to as the FUDs. Type shooters were, members at this club, and they didn't particularly care for, two 20-something kids showing up at their place and, shooting trap and skeet with a couple of Winchester Defenders, that were about 18 inches long. I shot trap with a pistol grip, and they changed the rules, of course. There was going to be no more of that. I did it safely. There was never a problem with the number of birds I broke. There was at that club, the sense I got that, if my gun wasn't, a $5,000 Franchi, then I was probably, out there, budget slinging lead and maybe not, using the correct gun. And of course, to step up to the line on the trap range with an 18.5-inch barreled Winchester Defender and to break 22 birds, it left a sour taste, I think, in a couple of people's mouths after they told me the gun was shit. And so to hit 22 out of 25 left a few people kind of pissed off, I think. And I mean, to go over to the trap range was one thing, but then to get over to skeet and, to excel over there and, be hitting 23, 24 birds, to really enjoy ourselves, it created a bit of a stir. And so next thing you know, there were a bunch of rules regarding, the minimum lengths for barrels and a host of other, rules that applied seemingly only to my friend. I mean, it got to the point where, it was almost abusive. We were being told that we were rowdy, and of course, we'd go over to the handgun range and we would shoot. And I mean, even if we didn't get silly back then in the early 90s, ammo dumps with 30-round magazines was not uncommon because that's what you could do. A lot of people ask me what it was like back in the day. My thumb still hurts from loading all those magazines. You learn to load less. I learned to load 10 rounds at a time in anything AR because that ammo was freaking expensive. I remember thinking that at the time. And so you gradually kind of get down to 10 anyway, unless, you want to load up a full Mag 30, which, your day might end early. Back before magazine capacities, you could load 30 rounds into your AR-15 and just do a dump into the dirt. And really nobody paid you much attention at most clubs. But at this particular club, we would do it once in a while. And I mean, we would get some heat. I remember it got to the point where they complained and we just looked at them and went, well, it's a gun club. There's going to be noise. You guys are making a lot of racket down there. Well, okay. So of course, one day, one of the members got right up in my buddy's face. And at a gun club, you don't expect people to argue. But obviously this man seemed to take offense to something, my good buddy Huba had said to him. And next thing you know, there's like an argument going on in the clubhouse. I mean, we're human beings and people can get irritable and do and say things that perhaps are hurtful to others. And of course, my friend took offense. And so it turned into what about it? And then of course, from that point forward, there became this kind of mission. We were, if you imagine the CGV as a young man, I was a bit of a brat too. Huba instigated though. I just jumped on board. We pretty much showed up at the range one day and we loaded up everything that we had. And back then, this was a different time. There really weren't the same rules. A lot of people don't understand that, at gun ranges today, the rules are in place. The protocol that's in place is time-tested, proven, and, it's there for a reason. I'm from a different era in shooting, and certainly I don't behave the same way I did when I was young. I remember people walking down range while people were still shooting their guns, and you just trust that guy over there wasn't going to zing one your way. Like there were people that were stupid enough to walk down range before anybody said that they were changing flags or anything like that, and certainly there wasn't the policies in place that there are today. We get to the range, and Huba's on a mission. We're going to irritate the hell out of the guys in the shotgun shack today. They want to gripe about our noise. That's fine. Let's load up everything we have, which for Huba, included, a 75 round drum on out of his AK-47, which, amongst all the other high capacity handguns. And you got to remember, folks, this was like during the time of Berettas and Tauruses, with 16 round mags, Tech 9s, Mac 10s, all these guns, they held full magazine capacities, and we were very fond of what they called, military machine gun like firearms. They used to call them bank hold up guns. When we walked into the rooms, like, oh, there's those two rowdies, and they weren't joking around. Like they were genuinely pissed at us. And so we loaded up everything we had, and then you had to know this club back then, folks. We were basically inside a what do you call them? Like a portable, with one wall missing. So the sound must have funneled out of this thing like a megaphone. We decided to discharge every single firearm that we had, lay it out on the table as fast as we could, and dump every magazine. I think we went through some ridiculous number, like 200 rounds in the span of 40 seconds, and we just dumped everything we had. And it was obviously a lot more than that. With that 75 round drum, capped it all off. I mean, that AK-47 barrel was like smoldering red hot. And so we created that kind of noise. Like there was literally smoke coming out of this thing. When we finished, we had ourselves a good laugh. We weren't even aiming at targets. I mean, we were just shooting at the dirt. I mean, it was a short range. It was like something like 10 yards or 15 yards. And so we were just blasting blindly at these giant berms and having a grand old time. And you know what? For two kids just enjoying themselves, I could think of worse things to do with my time. Basically we just spent as much money as we could bring to the range and just dumped it all out onto the berm wall. And decided to pack up and head into the shotgun shack with the lounge and see how the boys would react. Of course, we walked in and they did not look impressed at all. In fact, the range was from not impressed to outright scared. And of course, one of the guys, before we even left the range, which was separate from the lounge, one of the guys that they knew we liked, they sent him out to find out what was going on. And he poked his head in the door and said, "Is everybody okay?" And that was firearm community kind of nonsense that was going on back in the late 80s and early 90s. But since then, with the institution of all kinds of safety protocol, and certainly not the same kind of practices, I remember one range, God bless them, they had a bus on site, and I mean they shot up this bus like crazy. And of course everybody knew that this bus was out there. I mean, it was just on a piece of farmland. It grew into a wonderful club, and this bus is sitting out there. And I remember there's even an urban legend that the owner was on the bus once eating his lunch when somebody decided to start shooting at it one day, and had to say, like, "Stop, what are you doing?" There were people, I'm sure, like if I had a bus on private property and I had very little in terms of control and regulation, I would probably set up targets on the bus and do the whole hostage target thing. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, it was, if left to your own imagination. I understand the need for, regulation and safety protocol, and I wouldn't say that, that's a safe thing to do. But back then in the late 80s and early 90s, people weren't thinking the same way. And quite honestly, to have a bus at your disposal like that and not care if it gets shot up, hell, I would have done it too. But since that time, those kinds of things no longer occur. Going to the gun range is a very safe affair, folks. I mean, people walk up to the line, they uncase their guns, they undo their trigger locks, they place their items unloaded on the table, muzzle facing outwards at all times towards the berms, in a safe direction. Magazines are taken out, actions are opened. If a rifle is not in use, it is left with magazines taken out, bolts open, and exposed so that people can see that they're unloaded. There are red and green flags that determine whether or not people are allowed to approach the line and to handle their guns and to load magazines. I mean, all these things are in place to ensure people's safety. So you've got what essentially are the best people in the country in terms of behavioral performance. Quite honestly, they're the most screened, the most checked on a daily basis by the RCMP supercomputer. The CPIC running them nonstop. The firearm community is constantly being checked on to make sure that they're behaving themselves. They are the best people, hands down, I've met in the country. For those people to go to the range and under those circumstances operate firearms in a completely safe, manner, to crack down on those people seems unnecessarily harsh to me. So again, looking at this, and I always want to bring it back to the legislation. We're here to affect change. We're educating the public, and we're definitely bringing to the attention of people that don't necessarily know a lot about firearms, exactly what's going on out there. And we're doing it through social media, and that makes me really happy because I've had an opportunity to express myself in formats like this. And I'm always glad that you guys like to listen. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for this evening's episode of the Canadian Gun Vault Behind the Vault Door. I hope you've enjoyed it. And that's what I get for playing with the mic. Hope you've enjoyed it. And shoot straight, stay safe, Canada.